6 months had passed since humanity demonstrated their military superiority to the Galactic Council. The emergency session convened under very different circumstances than the last time humans had appeared before the assembled representatives. Humanity now held 3 seats at the council table, their representatives wearing simple military uniforms that looked plain and practical compared to the ornate robes and ceremonial armor of other delegates. The great crystal chamber that had once echoed with alien laughter at human expense was now filled with respectful silence as the various species listened carefully to every word the human representative spoke. The balance of power in galactic civilization had shifted completely, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Deho, now promoted to Secretary of Galactic Affairs, reviewed integration reports with quiet satisfaction. Human military bases throughout galactic space were fully operational human-designed defense platforms protected. Major trade routes and hybrid human-alien technologies were revolutionizing everything from starship design to planetary defense systems. The Council recognizes Admiral Eugene of the Earth Defense Force, announced Counselor Vextar, his tone respectful, in a way it had never been during humanity's first appearance. The Vorthic leader scales had lost much of their bright coloring in recent months, and his voice carried a weariness that spoke of a civilization coming to terms with no longer being the dominant power. Admiral Eugene stood wearing her uniform decorated with medals from a dozen recent conflicts that had established human authority throughout the galaxy. Counselors, I am pleased to report that the integration of human military forces with existing galactic defense units has exceeded all projections. Joint training exercises have improved response times by 40% and defensive capabilities have increased across all measurable metrics. General Korth of the Vorthak military nodded with genuine approval. Human tactical innovations have proven invaluable beyond our wildest estimates. The concept of combined arms warfare was completely unknown to us, but it has transformed our strategic capabilities in ways we are still discovering. Our soldiers are learning to think like predators instead of merely advanced. Pre-Commander Zixera clicked her mandibles in agreement. Kalari, warrior doctrine has been completely revised based on human combat philosophy. The emphasis on adaptability and improvisation has made our forces far more effective than they ever were under traditional methods. We have learned that sometimes the best plan is to have no plan at all. However, continued Admiral Eugene, we have a more pressing concern. Long-range sensor arrays have confirmed our earlier warnings. The signals from beyond the galactic rim are getting stronger, and we have finally identified their source. The main display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with red indicators marking the approach of something massive from intergalactic space. Red vectors showed projected paths that would bring an unknown force into contact with inhabited systems within less than 2 years. What are we looking at? Asked Counselor Vextar, though his voice suggested he was afraid to hear the answer. A fleet, replied Admiral Eugene grimly. Based on gravitational distortions and energy signatures, we estimate at least 10,000 vessels. Each one is approximately the size of a small moon. They are not following any known hyperspace routes. They are traveling through normal space at velocities that should be physically impossible even by our standards. Council chamber fell into terrified silence. The numbers were beyond comprehension. The largest fleet any galactic civilization had ever assembled contained fewer than 1,000 ships, and those were measured in kilometers, not astronomical units. This was an invasion force on a scale that defied imagination. Do we know their intentions? Asked General Korth. Their trajectory passes through 17 inhabited systems. Admiral Eugene explained, based on their current course, they will encounter the outer colonies first, then proceed systematically toward the core worlds. As for intentions, she paused, and the silence in the chamber became oppressive. The energy signatures match theoretical models for matter conversion weapons. They appear to be converting everything in their path into raw materials for ship construction and fuel. Commander Zixera mandibles clicked nervously. How do we fight something like that? We do not, Admiral Eugene replied bluntly, at least not the way you have been thinking about warfare. This is not a conflict between civilizations competing for resources or territory. This is a survival situation against something that views all organic life as construction material. The kind of threat humans have been dealing with since we first learned to use tools and discovered that everything on our world wanted to kill us. Ambassador Deho took the floor, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen his species dismissed and had lived to see them proven right for millions of years. My species lived on a world that tried to eliminate us every single day. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, asteroid impacts that sterilized continents, pandemic diseases that killed 90% of our population, predators that hunted us for sport and food. He gestured toward the display showing the approaching extragalactic fleet. We survived by being more adaptable, more vicious, and more determined than anything that wanted us dead. We learned that sometimes you cannot negotiate with extinction, sometimes you cannot hide from annihilation. Sometimes the only choice is to fight with everything you have and refuse to give up even when the odds are impossible. The Galactic Defense Force had never faced anything like this in their thousands of years of civilized warfare. As Admiral Rex VOR fleet took defensive positions around the Council worlds, they watched in growing horror as the human armada decelerated. From 30% light speed without any visible means of propulsion, the alien ships simply stopped as if momentum and physics meant nothing to them. The human fleet hung in space like a dark constellation of death. Their ships maintained perfect formation without any apparent communication between vessels. Each human vessel was different from the others, but they moved together like parts of a single organism that thought with one mind. Analysis complete, reported Chief Science Officer Delmar. From the flagship Sovereign Authority, the human vessels are using some form of gravity manipulation for both propulsion and deceleration. This technology is theoretically possible, but requires energy output equivalent to a small star. Our computers cannot even calculate how they are generating such power. Admiral Rex VOR studied the tactical display with growing fear and confusion. What is their fleet configuration unlike anything in our military databases? No two ships appear identical, but they fall into several general categories: large vessels that appear to be carriers, medium ships with obvious weapon emplacements, and swarms of smaller craft that could be fighters or autonomous drones. The total mass of their fleet exceeds our own by a factor of 3. What about weapons capabilities? Unknown, sir. They are not powering any systems we can recognize. No energy signatures that match known weapon types, no shield generators, no sensor arrays. We can identify it is as if they are not even prepared for battle. Rex VOR felt his scales tingle with nervous energy. An enemy that revealed nothing about their capabilities was far more dangerous than one that threatened and postured. Open a communication channel. The response came immediately in perfect galactic standard. This is Admiral Yu Jin of the Earth Defense Force. We request immediate audience with the Galactic Council to discuss terms of surrender. Stunned silence filled the Sovereign Authority bridge. Every officer stared at their instruments as if they had misheard the transmission. Rex VOR finally found his voice. Human Admiral, you are outnumbered 3-1 by the combined Galactic Defense Force. Perhaps you should consider your own surrender. Admiral Rex VOR came the calm reply. We have studied your species' military capabilities extensively. Your weapons are designed to fight other energy-based civilizations. Your shields are calibrated to deflect plasma and particle beams. Your armor is optimized against thermal damage. None of these preparations will help you against what we are about to demonstrate. And what exactly are you about to demonstrate? The difference between fighting for sport and fighting for survival. Without any warning or declaration of hostilities, the human fleet opened fire, but instead of the expected energy weapon, streams of projectiles erupted from magnetic acceleration systems that ran the entire length of each ship. Thousands of tungsten rods, each one accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, filled the space between the fleets like a metal rain. Stormed the Galactic Defense Force shields. Activated automatically energy barriers designed to deflect the most powerful weapons known to galactic civilization. The tungsten rods passed through them like they were not there, their kinetic energy completely unaffected by electromagnetic interference or energy dispersion. Field shields are completely ineffective, shouted Tactical Officer Jean Rath. The projectiles are pure kinetic energy. There is nothing for our shields to deflect or absorb. Admiral Rex VOR watched in horror as his capital ship's vessels that had taken decades to grow and had never been seriously damaged in combat, were systematically torn apart by weapons that belonged in a technological museum. All ships' evasive maneuvers return fire immediately. The Galactic Fleet plasma cannons and particle beams lanced through space toward the human ships, creating brilliant displays of destructive energy. But where galactic vessels relied on shields for protection, human ships simply were not there when the beams arrived. They moved with impossible agility for their size-shifting position in ways that defied physics as understood by alien Sciencer. Reported Navigation Officer Kestal. Human ships are using gravity manipulation for maneuvering. They are literally falling in whatever direction they choose while ignoring momentum and inertia our targeting computers cannot predict. Their movement patterns. How is that possible? According to our science officers, they have somehow learned to manipulate gravitational fields on a local level. Each ship exists in its own gravity well, allowing three-dimensional movement that our targeting systems were never designed to handle. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. The human fleet moved through the Galactic Defense Force like predators among prey. Their weapons never missed because they were not aiming at where the ships were, but where physics said they had to be. Their movement was unpredictable because they had rewritten the laws of physics for their own convenience. When the human fleet stopped firing, 70% of the Galactic Defense Force floated dead in space. The remaining ships hung powerless, their engines destroyed and their weapons systems melted into unrecognizable slag. The most advanced military force in galactic history had been defeated by an enemy using principles they did not understand. Admiral Eugen. Voice came over the communication system again, still calm and professional. Admiral Rexvoar, do you require medical assistance for your survivors? Rexvoar looked around his ruined bridge at officers who had spent their entire careers believing in the superiority of galactic civilization, at control panels that sparked and smoked from overloaded systems, at viewscreens showing the wreckage of ships that had been considered invincible. Why are you not destroying us completely? Because destruction was never our goal, Admiral Eugen replied. We tried to join your civilization peacefully. You rejected us. We tried to operate independently in neutral space. You attacked us. Now we are here to discuss new terms for coexistence. What terms? Simple ones. Humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with voting rights proportional to our military contribution to galactic defense. In return, we will provide protection against external threats and maintain peace between member worlds. Rex Vor. Bitter laugh echoed through his damaged bridge. Protection from what, Admiral? Your species have been very lucky. You have never faced a real external threat because your corner of the galaxy is relatively peaceful, but there are things out there in the dark between stars that make our little demonstration look like a training exercise. We have been monitoring signals from beyond the galactic rim for decades. Something is coming, and when it arrives, you are going to need warriors who understand real combat. The communication channel crackled with static as Rex Vor considered humanity ultimatum. And if we refuse, then you refuse. We will withdraw to our own space and let you handle whatever is coming on your own. But, Admiral, you should know, we humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We tried speaking softly first. Rex Vor looked out at the human fleet still hanging in perfect formation, still revealing nothing about their true capabilities, still waiting patiently for an answer. He realized that humanity had not shown them their full strength. They had demonstrated just enough power to prove their point while keeping their real weapons hidden. The Deathworlders had come calling, and they had brought with them a simple message: the galaxy could accept them as protectors or face them as conquerors. Either way, the age of galactic civilization dismissing humanity was over. The choice was theirs, but Rex Vor suspected it was not really a choice at all. The capture of two major alien vessels within a single month sent waves of panic through the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions were called, and for the first time in centuries, the Council declared a state of military emergency. These were not random pirate attacks by desperate criminals. They were coordinated strikes by an organized human military force that seemed to understand alien technology better than the aliens themselves. General Korth of the Vorthek military stood before the assembled council chamber, his blue scales now pale with worry and his usual confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled fear. We have severely underestimated the human threat, he announced to the gathered representatives. Intelligence reports indicate they have established at least 7 military bases in neutral space, all heavily fortified and defended by weapons. We do not fully understand 7 bases. Counselor Vextar's voice carried complete disbelief. How did they construct military installations without our knowledge? Our sensor networks monitor all construction activity in known space. They used our own captured personnel as a labor force. General Korth explained grimly. Both Vorthek and Kalari prisoners report being treated well, but forced to work on construction projects. The humans learned our technology by making us build it for them. They studied every component, every system, every design principle while we provided the expertise. Commander Zix-Era recently returned from captivity in human hands, clicked her mandibles in frustration. They watched us work and asked questions about everything. They made detailed recordings of every procedure, every technical specification, every operational protocol, but they did not simply copy our designs, they improved them. The council chamber fell into stunned silence. The idea that primitive humans could improve upon advanced galactic technology was almost beyond comprehension for species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization. Explained, demanded Counselor Vextar. Zix-Era report was chilling. Human engineering follows completely different principles than ours. We design for efficiency, elegance, and minimal resource consumption. Humans design for reliability, repairability, and maximum destructive potential. They took our plasma cannons and rebuilt them to fire twice as fast with half the power consumption. They modified our shield generators to overlap in ways we never considered creating defensive barriers stronger than anything we have achieved. She paused, her mandibles trembling slightly. And their new weapons. They have created something they call kinetic bombardment systems, magnetic accelerators that can launch projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. No shield technology in the galaxy can stop them because they transfer kinetic energy directly to the target. The energy goes right through our defenses like they do not exist. General Korth added his own disturbing intelligence. Human fleet composition is unlike anything we have encountered in galactic warfare. They do not build massive capital ships like our battle cruisers. Instead, they construct swarms of smaller vessels, each one capable of independent operation. Our tactical computers cannot effectively target such distributed formations because they were designed to fight organized fleets, not chaotic swarms. More concerning, he continued, is their manufacturing capability. Humans do not grow their ships in biological factories like we do, or assemble them from standardized components in orbital shipyards. They build everything from raw materials using automated factories that can be set up anywhere. This means they can replace losses faster than we can inflict them, and they can establish new production facilities in locations we cannot predict or monitor. Counselor Vextar scales flushed deep purple with anger. Then we increase our own military production. Alert all member worlds to begin emergency vessel construction. Mobilize every shipyard and every resource, sir. Interrupted Intelligence Officer Mortek. There is something else. Human prisoners have been interrogated extensively, and their responses are highly unusual. In what way? They show no fear of death. In combat, analysis of their brain chemistry during questioning reveals elevated levels of compounds associated with excitement and anticipation rather than fear. When asked about facing superior forces, they express confidence rather than concern. It is as if they enjoy the challenge of fighting against impossible odds. Ara nodded grimly. I observed this behavior during our battle. Human pilots deliberately crashed their fighters into our weapon systems, knowing they would die, but they were not sacrificing themselves in desperation. They were doing it as a calculated tactical decision because they believed it would help their team win. Impossible, protested Counselor Vextar. Self-preservation is the most basic survival instinct in any intelligent species. No rational being willingly chooses death. Not in humans, General Korth replied. Their evolutionary history on their death world created something unique in galactic civilization. They are the only known species that regularly risks individual survival for group advantage. They call it courage or honor, but it is actually a form of controlled aggression that makes them incredibly dangerous opponents because they cannot be intimidated or deterred by threats. The council session was suddenly interrupted by an urgent communication from the outer defense perimeter. Admiral Rex VOR of the Galactic Defense Force appeared on the main screen, his usually confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Counselors, we have a serious problem. Long-range sensors have detected a massive human fleet approaching the Council worlds. Estimated composition 300 vessels of unknown configuration moving in formation toward our core systems. 300 ships. Vextar voice cracked with disbelief. The entire Galactic Defense Force only maintains 200 active vessels across all member worlds, sir. That is not the worst part. Admiral Rex VOR continued. The human fleet is not approaching along any known hyperspace route. They are traveling through normal space at sublight speeds, but they are somehow maintaining velocity of nearly 30% light speed without any visible means of propulsion. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Any species that could achieve such velocities in normal space possessed technology far beyond anything in current galactic civilization. The humans were not just militarily aggressive, they were technologically superior in ways that the Council had never imagined possible. How is that possible? General Korth demanded. Unknown, sir. Our science teams are analyzing the sensor data, but they have no explanation for the propulsion system. The human ships appear to be manipulating gravitational fields on a massive scale, which should require energy output equivalent to a small star. Estimated time to arrival asked Counselor Vextar 17 hours until they reach the outer defense perimeter. Admiral Rex VOR replied. Orders, sir. Vextar looked around the chamber at his fellow Council members. For the first time in their species' histories, they faced an enemy that might actually be superior to them in every meaningful way. The humans they had dismissed as primitive Deathworlders were about to demonstrate exactly why their world had tried so hard to kill them and why they had survived anyway. Prepare all defenses. Vextar ordered. Contact every member world and request immediate military assistance. Mobilize every ship, every weapon, every defensive system we have available. And he paused, his scales flickering with colors of uncertainty. Prepare contingency plans for potential negotiations. The Great Galactic Council that had ruled civilized space for millennia was about to discover what happened when you dismissed a species that had spent millions of years learning to fight for survival. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing with them lessons that the galaxy was not prepared to learn. News of the peaceful dawn capture sent shock waves through the Galactic Council. The mighty Vorthic colony ship had been taken by primitive humans using weapons that belonged in a museum. Commander Zixera of the Kalari warrior caste demanded immediate action. The insectoid species had built their reputation on military precision and overwhelming technological superiority. They would show these upstart humans what real warfare looked like. The Kalari response was swift and without mercy. Battle cruiser Infinite Edge, a kilometer-long instrument of destruction, intercepted the human fleet in the asteroid belt of System K447. The ship carried 10,000 elite Kalari warriors, each one a masterpiece of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. Their red eyes could see across multiple light spectrums. Their forearms could operate weapons with impossible speed, and their chitinous armor could stop most known weapons. Commander Zixera stood on the bridge of her mighty warship, looking out at the asteroid field where the humans were hiding. Her mandibles clicked with anticipation as she activated the communication system. Human vessels, you are surrounded and outgunned. Return the stolen Vorthak ship and surrender immediately. This is your only warning. Captain So-Min of the human destroyer Defiant responded from her position among the asteroids. Commander, we are not looking for a fight, but if you want one, we are Rita Sexera. Mandibles clicked in what humans would recognize as laughter. You cannot hide among rocks forever. Mammals, our sensors can detect your heat signatures through kilometers of solid stone. Your primitive vessels stand no chance against Kalari battlecraft. The Infinite Edge began its assault with particle beams lancing through space to strike the asteroids where human ships had been detected. Massive chunks of rock vaporized under the alien weapons, creating brilliant flashes of superheated plasma that lit up the darkness like miniature suns. But when the light faded and the energy dissipated, the human ships were gone. Impossible, muttered sensor technician Krelith, her compound eyes studying the readings. Our scans showed definite engine signatures behind those asteroids. Their ships were destroyed completely, suggested Tactical Officer Morvek. Human technology might not leave recognizable debris patterns when vaporized Commander Zix-Era was not convinced. Something was wrong with this picture. Humans were cunning. In ways that the Kalari did not yet understand. Continue scanning. She ordered all weapons remain ready. The answer came from an unexpected direction. Instead of engaging the massive battlecruiser directly, the human ships had used the asteroid bombardment as cover to position themselves throughout the debris field. When they finally revealed their locations, it was not through sensor contact but through weapons. Fire magnetic acceleration cannons opened up from dozens of concealed positions, sending streams of tungsten penetrators toward the infinite edge at significant fractions of light speed. The Kalari ship shields flared and held, but the humans were not aiming at the main hull. Instead, they targeted sensor arrays, communication dishes, and weapon emplacements with surgical precision. They are using the asteroids as a weapons platform, realized Tactical Officer Morvek. They have somehow anchored magnetic accelerators throughout the debris field and are controlling them remotely. Clever, admitted Zix-Era, but insufficient. Our shields can withstand this bombardment indefinitely. All weapons return fire. Eliminate every asteroid in a 50-kilometer radius. The infinite edge unleashed its full arsenal, particle beams and plasma cannons, turning the entire asteroid field into a glowing cloud of vaporized rock and metal. The display was awesome and terrible, enough energy to sterilize a planet's surface being poured into empty space. Surely nothing could survive such devastating firepower, but as the energy weapons shut down and the glowing plasma began to cool, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Human fighters emerging from hidden positions throughout the debris field that should have been completely destroyed. These were not the sleek, organic shapes of Kalari aerospace craft. Human fighters looked like flying wedges of metal and machinery, all angles and exposed systems with no concern for aesthetics or elegance. They should have been easy targets for the infinite edge point defense network. Instead, they moved in patterns that defied all known fighter doctrine. They are not flying like any recognized tactics, reported Flight Control Officer Jeskara. No formation flying, no coordinated attacks. Each ship seems to be operating independently with no central command structure. Because where came a voice over the communication channel. This was Pilot Taesung of Fighter Squadron Omega. Kalari tactics assume predictable flight patterns and coordinated maneuvers, but humans learn to fly by watching birds, not by reading instruction manuals. The human fighters did not attack in neat waves or organized formations like civilized aerospace units. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects, each pilot improvising their own approach based on real-time conditions. Some dove directly at the infinite edge weapon emplacements, using their ship's own mass as kinetic weapons. Others played hit and run, striking quickly before disappearing back into the debris field. Most disturbing of all, they seemed completely unconcerned about their own safety. Kalari pilots were trained to preserve their valuable equipment and even more valuable genetically enhanced lives. Human pilots treated their fighters like expendable tools, ramming them into shield generators and weapons platforms without any hesitation whatsoever. Sir, reported Damage Control Officer Peckstar, we are losing defensive systems faster than we can repair them. The humans are not trying to destroy the ship, they are systematically disabling our ability to fight back. Commander Zix-Era finally understood what she was facing. These were not civilized warriors trying to win a traditional battle. They were predators trying to capture prey. They are not trying to destroy us, she realized with growing horror. They are trying to take us alive. The realization came too late. Human Marines were already swarming over the hull, cutting through armor plating with tools that looked like oversized welding torches, but moved through Kalari battle steel like it was soft clay. The Kalari had superior technology, better training, and overwhelming numerical advantage. None of it mattered against opponents who refused to fight by civilized rules. In 6 hours, the mighty Infinite Edge drifted powerless in space, its weapons destroyed and its engines disabled. Human boarding parties moved through the corridors like they owned the ship, neutralizing Kalari resistance with weapons and tactics that made no sense. By any military standard, they knew Captain Somin stood in the Infinite Edge command center, surrounded by restrained Kalari warriors who still could not comprehend their defeat. The humans had not just won, they had made it look easy. Your mistake, she explained to Commander Zix-Era, was assuming we would fight like you. This is impossible. Zixera clicked weakly. Our battle algorithms accounted for every known tactical doctrine in the galaxy known. Tactical doctrine, Somin agreed, but we are from a death world. We learn to fight by fighting everything, including each other. Your algorithms cannot account for 10,000 years of humans finding new ways to kill things that want to kill us. But your technology, your weapons work exactly the way they are supposed to work, Somin replied. The problem is not with our equipment. The problem is with your assumptions. You assume that advanced technology always beats primitive technology, but physics does not care about your assumption. Zixera looked around at her captured ship, at warriors who had never been defeated until today. How did you learn to fight like this? Being the prey species for most of our evolutionary history, Somin explained, every predator on our world was bigger, stronger, faster, or more dangerous than we were, so we learned to be smarter, more adaptable, and more vicious. We learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to be willing to do things that civilized beings would never consider. The Kaleri commander stared at this small human female who had just captured the most advanced warship in the Kalari fleet. What are you going to do with Somin? Smiled, and for the first time Zixera understood why humans were called Deathworlders. That smile belonged on the face of something that had spent millions of years learning to hunt. We are going to teach you how to really fight, because something is coming from outside the galaxy, and when it gets here, you are going to need to know how to be predators instead of just advanced prey. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council rejected humanity. The massive Vorthok colony ship, Peaceful Dawn, was drifting through space like a floating city. It was 15 kilometers long and carried 50,000 Vorthok civilians who were traveling to their new homeworld. The ship was beautiful, with crystal gardens and artificial beaches and climate-controlled areas that made the journey feel like a luxury. Vacation Captain Mordock was relaxing in his command chair on the bridge. His blue scales were shining under the soft lights as he looked over entertainment schedules for the passengers. The Vorthok had been traveling between worlds for thousands of years, and pirate attacks almost never happened in civilized space. Their shields could stop meteor strikes, and their weapons could destroy small asteroids. What could possibly threaten such advanced technology? The answer came without any warning. Loud alarms started screaming across the bridge as 3 small angular ships appeared from behind a nearby asteroid field. These ships did not look like the smooth curved vessels that Galactic Council species used. Instead, they looked like flying pieces of scrap metal held together with rough welding and exposed machinery. Captain Mordock sat up straight in his chair and activated the communication system. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Mordock of the Peaceful Dawn. You are approaching a civilian transport under Galactic Council protection. Identify yourselves immediately, or face the consequences. The reply came in heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Captain Jinwoo of the Korean Expeditionary Force. By the rights of salvage law in neutral space, your vessel is now claimed. Surrender immediately and no one gets hurt. Captain Mordock's scales turned purple with anger. Humans, you dare threaten a council protectorate? Our shields alone could stop the combined firepower of your entire primitive fleet. Stand down before we show you how useless your actions are. Shields do not mean much when you are not using them properly, came the calm response. Before Mordock could understand what this meant, the human ships opened fire, but instead of the expected primitive projectiles or basic energy weapons, streams of something struck the Peaceful Dawn hull at very specific points. Within seconds, the ship's mighty shields flickered and died. Completely impossible, shouted Navigation Officer Veltar. Our shield generators are rated to stop Class 9 plasma cannons. What did they hit us with? Scanner analysis complete, reported Sensor Technician Zixera, and her voice was shaking. The projectiles appear to be metal slugs, accelerated to approximately 15% light speed. Using magnetic acceleration, they struck our shield generator mounting points with surgical precision. Captain Mordock stared at the readings in complete shock. Metal slugs, they used kinetic weapons. That is impossible to aim with such accuracy at these distances, sir, interrupted Communications Officer Bextor. They are requesting permission to board. They say they have 30 Marines ready to secure the ship. 30 Marines? Mordock's bitter laugh echoed through the bridge. We have 2,000 security personnel aboard this vessel, every one of them trained in advanced combat techniques, activate all defensive protocols, and prepare to repel boarders. The first sign that something was very wrong came when the boarding pods attached to the hull. Instead of the careful, methodical cutting expected from civilized boarders, the humans simply blew holes through the armored bulkheads. Using explosive charges, atmosphere rushed out, emergency bulkheads slammed shut, and chaos erupted throughout the ship's security. Chief Corvash led the first response team toward Breachpoint Alpha. His soldiers were equipped with plasma rifles, energy shields, and powered armor that had never failed against any known threat. They took defensive positions behind reinforced barriers and waited for the primitive humans to stumble into their prepared trap. What came through the breach was unlike anything in Vorthak military experience. The human Marines wore bulky, angular armor that looked crude compared to the sleek Vorthak equipment, but they moved with terrifying efficiency. Instead of advancing into the prepared killing field, they threw small metal cylinders that filled the corridor with thick smoke. Primitive smoke screens, scoffed Corvash as he activated his thermal sensors. Our technology can see through this easily. His words were cut off as something small and fast struck his armor with tremendous force. The impact knocked him backward and warning lights flashed across his helmet display. His supposedly impenetrable energy shield had been completely bypassed by a simple metal projectile moving at impossible speed around him. His soldiers were falling to weapons that should have been ineffective against their advanced defenses. The humans were not using energy weapons or plasma bolts. They were using kinetic firearms that punched through shields and armor like they were not even there. Human Marines moved through the smoke like ghosts, appearing and disappearing so quickly that the Vorthak targeting systems could not lock onto them. They seemed to know exactly where every Vorthak soldier was positioned, while the aliens could barely see their own hands in the thick gray cloudfall. Back ordered Corvash, but the humans had already anticipated this move. More Marines emerged from secondary breaches, cutting off escape routes and forcing the Vorthak into defensive positions that quickly became traps. The aliens found themselves surrounded by enemies they could barely see, using weapons they did not understand. The human tactics made no sense by civilized standards. They did not announce their presence or demand surrender. They did not try to minimize casualties or preserve valuable equipment. They simply moved through the ship like a force of nature, taking control of critical systems and neutralizing resistance with brutal efficiency. Within 2 hours, Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of the Peaceful Dawn. His armor was scratched and scorched but intact. Behind him, his Marines had secured the entire 15-kilometer ship with minimal casualties on either side. Captain Mordock and his crew sat in restraints, staring at their captors in shock and disbelief. How was all Mordock could manage to say. Jinwoo removed his helmet, revealing a young face marked by old battle scars. Your technology is very impressive, but it is designed to fight other advanced civilizations. You build shields to stop energy weapons and armor to deflect plasma bolts, but kinetic weapons, he smiled grimly, those work on the same principles they have always worked on. Physics does not care how advanced you think you are, but our sensors, Mordock protested, our targeting systems, our tactical computers are all designed to track energy signatures and predict civilized movement patterns. Jinwoo explained, we do not use energy weapons, so your sensors have nothing to lock onto. We do not move in formation or follow standard attack patterns, so your computers cannot predict what we will do next. The Vorthak captain stared at the human in growing understanding. You studied our weaknesses. We studied everything, Jinwoo replied. We watched your military exercises. We analyzed your ship designs. We learned how your technology works, and more importantly, how it does not work. Your shields are perfect against energy weapons, but they cannot stop solid matter moving fast enough. Your armor can deflect plasma, but it crumples under kinetic impact. Jinwoo walked over to the main display showing the Peaceful Dawn specifications. Your mistake was assuming that advanced technology always beats primitive technology. But sometimes the old ways work better, especially when your enemy is not prepared for them. Captain Mordock looked around his bridge at control panels that had been designed by the greatest engineers in Vorthak civilization. All of it had been defeated by humans using weapons that any civilized species would consider museum pieces. What do you want? He asked quietly. Jinwoo considered the Question for a moment, we tried to join your galactic community peacefully, you rejected us. We tried to establish our own territory in neutral space, you sent ships to stop us. Now we are taking what we need to survive and protect ourselves, who are pirates, no captain. We are a military force operating under the laws of neutral space. Your council does not recognize our right to exist, so we are creating our own rights. The Peaceful Dawn and her passengers will be treated well, but your ship now serves humanity. The human captain gestured toward the view screen showing the vast emptiness of space. Your council made a choice when they dismissed us as primitive Deathworlders. Now they get to learn what Deathworlders do when they are pushed into a corner. As Jinwoo and his marines began the process of taking complete control of the massive colony, Ship Captain Mordock realized that his species had made a terrible mistake. They had judged humans by their technology instead of their capabilities. They had assumed that primitive weapons meant primitive tactics. The humans had just proven that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was not the one with the best technology, but the one willing to use whatever worked. The Deathworlders were about to teach the galaxy a lesson that civilized species had forgotten. Sometimes survival mattered more than sophistication. The huge crystal room of the Galactic Council was filled with strange sounds that meant laughter from different alien species. Ambassador Daeho walked slowly across the smooth floor toward the center, where all the alien leaders sat on their special chairs. His human shoes made small clicking sounds that seemed very quiet compared to the loud alien voices around him. The room was bigger than any building Daeho had ever seen on Earth. The walls were made of some kind of blue crystal that seemed to glow from inside, and the ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Floating lights moved around like tiny stars, giving everything a soft white glow that made the aliens look even more strange and scary. Daeho was wearing his best Earth diplomatic uniform, but next to these aliens he looked very small and weak. The Vorthak representatives were tall blue creatures with scales that changed colors when they moved. Their leader was sitting on a chair that looked like it was made from one giant purple crystal, and his yellow eyes were staring down at Daeho like he was looking at some kind of interesting bug. The Kaleri delegates were even more frightening. They looked like giant insects with hard black shells covering their bodies and forearms. Each their leader had bright red eyes that never seemed to blink, and when she moved her mouth parts clicked together, making sounds that hurt Daeho ears. Other alien species filled the rest of the huge room. Some looked like walking trees with bark for skin. Others were floating in tanks of green liquid because they could not breathe the same air as everyone else. A few looked almost like humans, but their skin was purple, and they had 3 eyes instead of 2. Council leader Vexstar was the biggest Vorthak in the room. His scales were dark blue with silver spots, and when he stood up to speak he was almost 3 times as tall as Daeho. The alien leader looked down at the human ambassador, and his mouth opened, showing rows of sharp white teeth. Your species comes from what we call a Class 12 Deathworld, said Vexstar in a voice that sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. Your planet has gravity so strong it would crush most civilized beings. Your weather is violent and dangerous. Your animals are nightmare creatures that eat each other alive. How could such a terrible place possibly create good soldiers? Daeho stood straight and kept his face calm, even though his heart was beating very fast. He had practiced this speech many times on the long trip from Earth. Perhaps that terrible environment is exactly why humans would make excellent soldiers. We have survived and grown strong because of these challenges, not in spite of them. The alien laughter got louder. Several Kalari clicked their mouth parts in what Daeho had learned meant they thought something was very funny. A group of the tree-like aliens made deep, rumbling sounds, and their leaves shook like they were in a strong wind. General Korth stood up from his chair behind Vexstar. He was older than the council leader, and his scales were more gray than blue, but his voice was just as loud and scary. Survived, he said, making the words sound like a joke. You barely escaped from your own planet. Surface, your technology is like toys compared to ours. Your spaceships are just metal boxes held together with primitive welding. Your weapons still use explosions to push metal pieces through the air. The general walked closer to Daeho and looked down at him. The civilized species in this room evolved on peaceful garden worlds with gentle weather and friendly animals. Yet we developed technology that is thousands of years ahead of anything your species has built. We can travel between stars. In days while it takes you months, we can destroy entire moons with single weapons while you still fight with chemical rockets, Commander. Zixera of the Kalari stood up and her forearms moved in patterns that Deho knew meant she was very amused. "We have studied your military history, human," she said in a voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone. "You fight each other constantly over water and land and ideas. This shows you cannot work together, and you do not think before you act. Civilized species solve problems by talking and using advanced weapons, not by hitting each other with sticks." Deho felt his hands tighten into fists behind his back, but he kept his voice steady. "Our conflicts have taught us important lessons about fighting and staying alive under pressure. We have faced events that could have killed our entire species many times, and each time we came back stronger," said General Korth, and his laugh was like thunder. "Your average person lives for less than 100 years. Our warriors live for 300 years and can survive in the vacuum of space for hours without protection. Your bodies are soft and weak and break easily. You need special breathing equipment in most civilized atmospheres. Your temperature tolerance is so narrow that you die if it gets too hot or too cold." General gestured with one large clawed hand toward the Kalari delegation. "Kalari warriors can regrow lost arms and legs. Their eyes can see across 12 different types of light that your eyes cannot even detect. Vorthic soldiers have natural armor that can stop energy weapons, and we can see the heat from living bodies through solid walls." Ambassador Deho straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Vexstar. "We may not have natural armor or long lives, but we have something else, something you might not understand until you see it working." "And what might that be?" asked Vexstar in a tone that made it clear he thought the human was about to say something stupid. "Determination," Deho replied in a quiet voice. "The kind that comes from having to fight for every breath, every meal, every day of life on a world that is constantly trying to kill youth." Chamber exploded with alien sounds of amusement. The Kalari clicked so fast it sounded like rain on a metal roof. The Vorthak made deep rumbling sounds that shook the crystal walls. Other aliens made noises that Deho could not even describe, but he knew they were all laughing at him. "Commander." Zixera walked forward until she was standing right in front of Deho. Her red eyes looked down at him and her mouth parts moved in what he had learned was the Kalari version of a smile. "Determination is nice, human, but it cannot stop plasma bolts or deflect quantum weapons. Your species' military assessment ranks them at the bottom of all known space-traveling civilizations. Perhaps you should focus on trading goods or sharing culture instead of trying to be warriors." The other aliens nodded and made agreeing sounds. Several of them were already standing up and gathering their things like the meeting was over and they had more important places to be. "Counselor." Vexstar raised one clawed hand and the room became quiet. "The decision is final," he announced in a voice that echoed off the crystal walls. "Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Defense Force. Your species may continue to exist in neutral space, but you will not be granted military status or defense contracts. This session is now finished." As the alien delegates began filing out of the chamber, many of them made dismissive gestures or sounds in their own languages that Deho did not need to understand to know they were insults. The Kalari clicked their mouth parts mockingly. The Vorthik rumbled in what sounded like satisfied agreement. The tree-like aliens rustled their leaves in patterns that somehow managed to seem condescending. Ambassador Deho gathered his papers and electronic devices, slowly taking his time. While the aliens left, he waited until he was alone in the huge crystal chamber before he allowed himself to smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a human might make when they realized their opponent had just made a very big mistake. He pressed a small button hidden inside his uniform sleeve. The device sent a coded message all the way back to Earth. The message was very short, but it carried information that the Galactic Council could never imagine. "They are not interested in our help. Proceed with independent colonization protocols." The aliens who had just dismissed humanity as weak and primitive had no idea what they had refused. Earth military commanders had been preparing for exactly this situation for many years. If the galaxy would not accept human protection, perhaps it would soon learn to respect human independence. Death World warriors they had laughed at were about to show the galaxy what real fighting looked like when you had spent millions of years learning to survive on a planet that wanted you dead. Every human child grew up knowing that sometimes you had to fight things bigger and stronger than you were, and sometimes you had to be willing to do terrible things to stay. Eliva's Deho walked out of the crystal chamber and toward his small human shuttle. He thought about all the alien representatives who had just made fun of his species. None of them had ever faced a real predator, none of them had ever had to choose between fighting and dying. None of them understood what it meant to be the descendants of creatures who had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on the most dangerous planet in known space. Soon they would learn